Mhm. Hey, welcome everybody. This is the webinar that we've been talking about. This is the Beyond Techniques webinar about mixing together NLP with Sleight of Mouth with Ericksonian hypnosis in an effort to become a complete essential coaching skills professional. I'm really glad you're here. I'm a little nervous. I haven't done one of these webinars in a while, but I just also want to say, um, I'm just I'm in my living room. You're welcome to join me here. I'm not trying to sell you. This isn't a big sales pitch. This is an invitation. This is a demonstration of what I do with people. Um, just, I know a lot of marketing these days, gets old after a while, and people do webinars and they do these things and they have lead magnets, and that's great. That's really good stuff. And then it gets old and then it's not so great anymore. So, I'm appreciative that you are probably aware that this is for a sales thing. It is. I'm going to be right up front about it. I'm trying to let people know about this opportunity. I'm not trying to sell you. If you don't want to be here, I don't want you here. Basically, this is a year-long cohort that I'm inviting you to be a member of. So this is where we get to know each other for a long time, for a long period of time. So, and by the way, I see some people popping in. Great to see the names. Martin, so good to see you. Dave, Linda, thank you so much for being here. It's difficult for me to multitask, so I'm probably not going to see very much of the comments that are in there. I do have an associate, Michelle, sort of in the waiting room, green room, off stage a little bit, who might be able to respond to those things more than I can, but I'm going to be trying to do some presentations. So here's the deal. I teach classes in Sleight of Mouth, what I call neo-Ericksonian hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming. I don't teach certifications like I used to in the practitioner and master practitioner levels of certification in NLP. Don't do that anymore. But I teach what I consider to be essential coaching skills within the realm of NLP. What does a coach really need to know and be able to do in the realm of NLP? So I'm going to be just going through some of those things today. I also am aware some of you don't know anything about NLP or Sleight of Mouth, perhaps not even about Ericksonian hypnosis. I don't know what you know. I don't know who's here. I literally have no clue how many people are watching, except I know 3 or 4 people have commented in this side thing. So I have at least 3 or 4 people. Thank you for being here. And so, yeah. I'm also going to talk about what we talk about when we are referring to beyond techniques. The kind of overview of this webinar is beyond techniques. How do you blend these 3 techniques together to be in a place where you are beyond them? So it's not just about, I'm going to do an NLP process now, or I'm going to do Sleight of Mouth now, or I'm going to make a transfer now. It's like, how do you blend them together in a sort of seamless coaching conversation, if you will? So I have a little pop-up screen and just get it rid of there. Okay, good. So thank you for that. And so with no further ado, I'm going to see if it works, if I can share my screen with you. I think that I can. Pretty sure this worked last time in just rehearsal. Yeah, there it goes. So Beyond Technique, the Art of Deep Change is what we're talking about today. And it incorporates, ironically enough, techniques of neuro-linguistic programming, Sleight of Mouth, neuro-linguistic programming, and how do I get the cursors to use? Okay, NLP, Sleight of Mouth, and neo-Ericksonian hypnosis. Quick word on neo-Ericksonian hypnosis. I know that some of you are from other mailing lists, people who have told you about this webinar, who probably do know quite a bit about Ericksonian hypnosis, maybe more than I do. I wouldn't be too surprised. I studied Ericksonian hypnosis with some of the sort of second generation Ericksonians, Stephen Gilligan as an example, Bill O'Hanlon as an example. Many of those guys would allow me into their classes. I don't know if you can see the piano in the background, but I was a musician by trade, by training and trade. So I wasn't really allowed into some of these Ericksonian trainings that really wanted just, PhDs or social workers or people in the classes. So they literally closed the door in my face when I tried to get in some of those classes. Fortunately, there were some others who would let me in. So I was able to study with some of the best, I think, in the fields, O'Hanlon and Gilligan among them. But I also studied with a guy named Dave Dobson a lot. I studied with Dave extensively, and he did not do Ericksonian hypnosis. Very, very, very similar. A lot of overlap. He met Erickson. I have a picture of them together. Met Erickson once, but developed his techniques separately from Erickson. Perhaps somewhat parallel, but nevertheless, parallel doesn't mean they meet, although they did meet. So when I teach what I teach, I can't just call it Ericksonian hypnosis. I was never certified by Erickson. In fact, nobody was. So I call it neo-Ericksonian hypnosis because really, in a way, we're building on what he left behind. People have gone beyond, if you will, what Erickson did. He died in 1980. That's a long time ago. Don't want to count the years, but that was a long time ago. There's a lot has come since. A lot has come since. So we pay homage to that, if you will, through the neo-Ericksonian hypnosis. But we blend all three of them here in the Essential Coaching Skills. I teach all three of those Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays during the week. You're invited to join us. And what we do in Sleight of Mouth is we help to learn and listen. If you listened to yesterday's Facebook Live thing I did, I had a guest, Steve Ryan, join me here. He was talking about, you need to listen. Sleight of Mouth is about listening to what a person's beliefs are, then conversationally guiding them to perhaps a better one and more useful belief. And it says you can win any reasonable argument, and that's in quotes or at least in parentheses, because you can't win any argument. Some people just don't want to give in no matter how much you present good arguments in the favor of the other thing. They just won't shift for whatever reason. They've decided to believe what they want to believe. NLP skills you can't do without. Change techniques. There's amazing things. NLP has left a whole host of things that you can do. Remarkably effective things. I worked for a while with this thing called the Research and Recognition Project, where we worked with veterans who had experiences during the war or during training camp, a lot of them boot camp sort of stories. It was hard for me to listen to them, and they lived through them. And we did NLP techniques. One NLP technique with these guys because it was a controlled study. We wanted to see what this one technique done 3 sessions, 3 sessions would have, and it had remarkably effective results. People were no longer suffering, officially from PTSD. They didn't have the flashbacks. They didn't have the nightmares. In a sense, they were cured. They were sleeping through the night, which they hadn't done in 40 years in some of them, right? It works. NLP is a remarkable set of tools. We're not teaching all of them. This is not a practitioner course. It's not a master practitioner course, but it's some of the essential skills that you need to know for being a good coach, which is what I am and what you can be here. And then finally, of course, the neo-Ericksonian hypnosis, where we're learning simple and effective ways of using hypnotic trance with your clients. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about people that I was working with just recently. Probably some of those of you who know about Milton Erickson know that he would often basically, when people would ask him questions about hypnosis, he'd say, yeah, well, I had a client once and he'd tell these stories about clients, and that's the way he taught. Ericksonian hypnosis, what became known as Ericksonian hypnosis. So I just wanted to tell you a couple little stories about a client or two that I've had recently, and how the blending of these 3 skills do go beyond technique. When I talk about beyond technique, I used this metaphor the other day. I took a class once at the Culinary Institute. My wife gave me this class on knife skills. I like to cook and do things in the kitchen. But she gave me a course and at the Culinary Institute on knife skills, so I'll cut things more efficiently. And it was great. It was a great course, but taking a course on knife skills doesn't make you a better chef or a cook necessarily. It maybe makes certain techniques in it more efficient. But there's a lot of skills that go into being a chef that's beyond a technique of knife skills. But it's part of it. you want to be a good chef, you need to have good knife skills. You need to have all these different techniques at your fingertips. Being a piano player, you need to know how to do scales. You need to know how to do arpeggios. You need techniques in order to be able to sit down and go like, I feel an emotion I would like to express musically, and be able to do that, be able to create something in the kitchen with what's there, not necessarily what's in a particular recipe book. So we're going beyond the technique to do that. So stories. Yesterday, without mentioning any names, I had a client, and by the way, this is my office. When I say I have clients, I do have an office not far from here that I see people in occasionally who want to travel up to this place in upstate New York where I'm residing. But mostly it's on Zoom. Mostly it's like this, and I talk to people. So this client that I had yesterday is a professional football player who's gone on to coaching in the NFL, and he wanted some help with his transition of going from being a player to being a coach. So I could immediately sense that there was a tension, a stress in his body. You pick it up, right? You see this state that he's in. He's like really nervous. When I worked with him before as a quarterback, didn't have that. It was about lots of other things, but that level of stress wasn't there. The uncertainty in his new function. So we started off joking around, making jokes and just sort of changing his state, because I felt that he needed to be in a different state of mind in order to be open to what it is that we were talking about. So in a sense, that's kind of an NLP thing, as I'll show you later. The NLP a lot is about state. What state are you in? If you're in a good state, you can access your resources. If you're in a not so good state, you have trouble accessing your resources. It's also tied in, of course, to Erickson hypnosis and other things as well. I know that. So it's a big generality to say it's an NLP thing. But let's just say, for argument's sake, it's like knife skills. It's in that category, right? It's in that category. It's perhaps even a little bit more like Frank Fairley's provocative therapy. Frank Fairley was also modeled by Bandler and Grinder in the early days of NLP. So it's part of it, really, sort of, at least. In my book, it is. For me, it is. So we were joking around, and he probably just thought we were just shooting the shit, if you will. Hadn't seen each other for a while, but I was purposeful. I was doing it for a reason, and I wanted to get him to a certain place where we could start then going a little further. All the while, I'm listening for what his belief system is, what his belief structure is. What is he saying if then means? I'm listening for his belief about it. Why is he stressed about being a coach? What's the situation, here? And so as I listened for his belief coming out while we were joking around, then I thought, oh, okay, got it. And I've realized what he was actually feeling behind all these tensions that he was, I don't know, what he was believing, what he was thinking behind the feelings is what I'm trying to say. And so when I finally got to that point, I was able to start doing a little bit of sleight of mouth with him, or just saying some things like, isn't it more important to focus on the player rather than what they're thinking of you? Because ultimately, if you don't do that, they're not going to get better. And what's the point to being a coach is to get the players to be better. I said, it's like, and this is a metaphor, started like playing a piano. It's not about my teaching a kid how to play a Beethoven, and I'll sit down and play it for him. This is how Beethoven goes. It's like getting him to do it. A little metaphor. So I started doing sleight of mouth about his belief that, people would be judging him as a former player instead of a coach. And then we did some hypnosis, which is what he said he wanted in the first place, right? Sometimes people will tell you what they want, but you realize as a coach, it isn't necessarily what they need right away, at least. But we then did some, hypnosis. He had done some with me before when he was a player. And so we were able to move that in as well. And throughout the trance induction, I kept referring back to the beliefs that we'd structured and the sleight of mouth stuff. Kept making little references to the jokes to keep it lighthearted and feeling fun and on top of things. And throughout this whole process, maybe lasted 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes since we started. He went into a very, very deep trance. And I also allowed a little bit of silence to enter in. because I believe that people really need to do internal work. We are setting a stage. We are giving them the opportunity for them to change themselves. So brought him back out around 10 minutes before the hour and started talking back on it. One of the things that Erickson often referred to is having the ratification of the change, to get the agreement that, yes, a change has happened. So we started talking about how did he feel when he thought back about, coaching now and being in that situation. And it was a completely different situation, completely different frame. NLP is often thought of as a system of basically two things, anchoring and reframing. So we had really reframed the situation. So he was looking at it differently. So very similar situation, really, in the way that I approached it with another client that I had, who was a young woman whose father I'd worked with many years ago. And this is his teenage daughter. I don't want to go into too many details, but they're not going to be watching this. I'm not going to see this for sure. But let's say she was, let's just put it this way, she was a picky eater. All right, I'm not going to go into any diagnoses or things that's beyond my pay grade, but let's just say her way of presenting was that she was a picky eater, let's just say. So again, listening for the belief, listening for why is that the case? Where does it come from? If this, then that equals what? What's that mean to you? So we went through this sort of conversational period. This is actually over several periods. I think I've had 4 sessions with her now. But starting with the belief about what it's all about, I think that we do belief change in any of these circumstances, whether you're doing Sleight of Mouth, which is directly about beliefs, or you're doing NLP processes, or doing Ericksonian hypnosis trances or regular hypnosis trances, whatever it is, we're really getting a person to believe something different. When we're end of the day, when all is said and done, they need to believe something different. Right? That they're capable of this, or that they're willing to do this, or they've got all the resources they need to do that sort of thing. So we were able to find out what her beliefs were about it, reframe it so that she wasn't like a little girl, picky eater person, but she was now a scientist. She was an anthropologist kind of person investigating different foods of the world. And she was like she was judging them, not whether it was good or bad, like it or not like it, but on a scale of 0 to 100. Where would I put this on a scale? And she was able to really reframe her thinking about, I'm studying foods, and what's not just good or bad, but what's the texture? What's the flavor? So it was really presenting a very different frame of who she is. What's her identity going into this? And then, of course, we do hypnosis, right? So we do some hypnotic processes where she feels herself being really adventurous and fun. And the food is about having adventures and having fun. And she sees herself going forward into the future, doing this over the years, being an adventurer. She could move to New York City. She could move to Los Angeles. She could move to Paris. She could move anywhere in the world because she's like that. She's an adventurer. She's capable. It's very beautiful to see this blossoming of a person. That's what I love about being a coach, is that you can really see how people overcome their limitations and their previously held beliefs that maybe have been around since childhood. Even in the case of a 70-year-old person, their beliefs can have been around since childhood. So it's amazing to see it sort of drop away. And it's not the kind of thing that you got to go back into their childhood and do like severe long-term psychoanalysis to get to that thing that developed in childhood. Erickson said that's just called psychological archaeology. It was Erickson's term for it, psychological archaeology, where he said, no, you've gotten into certain habits, patterns of living. And all you need to do really is interrupt the old patterns and start taking on new patterns, changing new patterns. So that's what we do with all these things. Let me, for interest's sake of people who don't really know what I'm talking about, or don't know what Sleight of Mouth is, maybe you know what NLP stands for, neuro-linguistic programming, but don't really know that much about it. There's a lot of different people here. So let me just give a quick overview. I've prepared some slides, some PowerPoint slides. So let me just go through them rather quickly. So you just get an overview of not what I'm talking about, but also what I'll be inviting you to be a part of over the next year. This is a year-long membership program that we're offering today. And yeah, excuse me one second. So yeah, here we go. That's the beginning. This is not the beginning. Oh, okay. So it's all about beliefs. It's about changing beliefs, really. So sleight of mouth. Here are 14 different sleight of mouth patterns. Sleight of mouth is about having a plethora of possible responses to a person's stated belief. And this is it. This is all of them right here. Reality, strategy, model of the world, counterexample. So what we learn over the course of 4 months, 4-month cohort is a typical, session length. And then we'll repeat it and do it again. In the period of the 4 months, we repeat, of course, the 4-month cohorts 2 to 3 times a year, depending on traffic and holidays and stuff. But what we do is we get these 14 patterns into our bones, into our fingers. Into our fingers is a term I use for piano playing, because once you get a piece memorized and stuff and get it in your fingers, and you can kind of play it without thinking about it, and that's where the music comes from. So you get these patterns into your fingers. But honestly, looking at it like that, you might probably think, well, that's a lot of stuff. And it is. It's a lot of stuff. So what we do is we realize, your brain doesn't really work in this lateral kind of way. It's more of a, mess, really. So we do what's known as a kind of a mind map concept, where we put the main idea in the center and have these things moving around it in a kind of analog clock version. So instead of having it just be like this, we do it more like this. So these are the 14 different patterns in an arrangement around the belief that's in the center there. The 2 bolded boxes in the middle, you're being late means you don't care about me, is a belief that somebody might have and state to you because you showed up late for lunch again. And so they say you're being late means you don't care about me. And then you've got all these different ways of responding to help them, not be so mad and maybe see it differently. That's one way sleight of mouth can be used, is to defend yourself. And of course, we're going to be talking about Milton Erickson. I thought I changed the slide. It shouldn't be there at the moment. But sorry, I moved that. Why did that get back? Maybe this is an older version. That's a disturbing thought. I'm going to try to ignore that. So looking at sleight of mouth for a moment, we have to decide what is a belief. We have to figure out what a belief is in order to be able to change it. And we want to recognize that beliefs are around us all the time. You don't have to think about it, listen for a belief like, I believe in the nature of the universe is, you don't have to look at something that huge. Believing that, drinking 8 ounces of water every hour is a belief. It's just a thing. Believing that too much time on the phone is bad is a belief. I believe I'll take a check in my news feed anyway, see what's going on. It's all beliefs, right? But what is a belief? Every single belief in the world has the same exact structure, but we don't get it. What we get is a label. We get a label as if it's like a label on a suitcase. Like this guy says, I believe in Yeti. Obviously the Yeti is also another word for the abominable snowman. Kind of like Bigfoot, only different. Maybe it's the same. Who knows? Haven't seen them together. Haven't seen them together in the same room. Maybe they're the same guy. Anyway, somebody says, I believe in the Yeti. And then somebody else says, yeah, I believe in the Yeti. And they have the same belief, same label on their suitcase. So you think to yourself, they must have the same stuff inside that suitcase. So if you start asking questions, being a good NLPer that you are, you might say that to the first guy, well, how do you know that? What makes it that way? Where does that come from? And they open their suitcase and you notice, oh my God, it's full. They have all these references. They have all these resources. It's just stocked with stuff. And you think to yourself, okay, well, that's why they believe it. I guess that's what it takes to believe in the Yeti. The other guy must have exactly the same stuff inside his, exactly the same suitcase. It's got the same suitcase, same brand, same label, same everything on it. Must be the same inside too, right? Maybe. But then you ask him questions or her questions, and suddenly you open up their suitcase, you unpack their belief, and you get nothing but a pair of old socks with a moth flying out of them. They got nothing. They got nothing supporting their belief at all. But we want to find out, so we have to find out what the structure of their belief is. All beliefs have this structure, cause, effect, means. This is wonky. For some reason, putting it up on the screen has changed where the words go. It's the triangle on the left should be the cause. The square in the middle should say effect over it, and then the meaning should be over the circle. Let's see if the next slide is any better. Okay, it's a little means. It's a little bit better. If then means is a slightly better approximation of what that's supposed to say. So all beliefs have this structure to it. Every single belief in the world has a structure. So what we do in Sleight of Mouth is we listen for it. We find ways of figuring out what a person's belief actually is. They might say one thing like it's good, but that represents a belief. You say, well, what's good? How is it good? In what way is it good? How do you know it's good? And you ask questions to ultimately find out what their belief is. Because then when you do, then you can start doing belief change. But you really can't do it very effectively if you don't know where they're coming from. You can't guide a person from one city to another city if you don't know what city they're in to start with. Right? How do you get to Cleveland? Well, it depends on where you're starting from. Right? So you got to figure that out. So what we do with Sleight of Mouth is we find a set of tools and we figure out a way to organize them. Instead of having like a messed up workbench, you have like a systematic workbench. So that's what this is. This is a systematic organizational tool for all the different Sleight of Mouth tools, all the different patterns that you have available to you. So you put the belief in the center instead of the three-part belief. You just do 2 parts of it. X causes Y in this case. And then you have all these different Sleight of Mouth patterns that are available to you. This is what we learned to do over the course of our cohort together. We learned how to do this. We learned how to get good at it. We learned to be fast at it. And over the 4 months of doing it, you get it so that it's just automatic. Just pops up in your brain. So also we're going to be learning, this is where this comes in, of Milton Erickson, Ericksonian hypnosis. Now, I could spend a year or more just talking about Ericksonian hypnosis. And we do. We spend an awful lot of time talking about Ericksonian hypnosis. What I'm going to be talking about today is a very small part of it. It's kind of like knife skills for being a chef. This is just a tiny little thing. But one thing that Erickson was good at was noticing that communication is only 7% the words that you say, but a much bigger portion of it is the tonality that you use when you say it. So the way he said certain things got into your unconscious differently than if you didn't say them that way. So as an example, hypnotic commands. These lines that you see here are indicating tonality. So if I was to say this phrase, you want to say that out loud, and just said it like this, you want to say that out loud. It's just flat, straight across. It's just basically a statement. It's not even a very meaningful statement. But if I say, you want to say that out loud and go upwards in the tonality there, then it becomes a what? A question. If I say it with a downwards inflection, like this third example, then it becomes a command. Say, you want to say that out loud. And I'm telling this person, they want to say that out loud. Right? Erickson was acutely aware of how this tonality affected these things he was telling people. So he had things that we've, again, tiny sliver of Ericksonian hypnosis, but he used to use embedded commands. So if you wanted to tell somebody to go to the store, he'd say, go to the store. Right? If you want to embed that command in a larger sentence, you might say something like, if anyone here wanted to be a deer, they could go to the store for me now. And you could embed it. Go to the store is still the command, but it's embedded in a longer sentence structure, so it's less, obvious that you're telling them to go to the store. There's some other examples. Maybe you'll discover new resources you didn't even know you had. I don't know if you'll feel wonderful about it. Different ways of using these embedded commands. So what if we put Sleight of Mouth together with Ericksonian hypnosis, or this aspect of Ericksonian hypnosis? So you take all these little things, and let's say this person, by the way, this example right here, I hope you can see it on your screen. It's pretty small on mine right now, but this example right here, if it's too fast, then it won't last. That belief that's in the center there, you see the middle squares that are darkened. If it's too fast, then it won't last, is the belief we're working with here. That's about NLP, because a lot of times if you do an NLP process, it might only take you 10 minutes or something like that, or an hour, maybe one session. And somebody said, who had a phobia when they walked into your office, walks out of your office without a phobia. Other people will be saying, oh my God, that doesn't make any sense. Therapy takes years. That must be a charlatan. It'll come back. If it's too fast, it won't last. It'll come back. It'll hit you back when you least expect it. It'll come back, and the phobia, that's what they'll say. They'll say if it's too fast, then it won't last. But what we want to say, if anybody is questioning our coaching ability, is we want to have different ways of responding. That's what all those different boxes are around it. Ways of responding to that false and limiting belief about NLP that if it's too fast, then it won't last. So we have all these things to say. So what if we took one of them? Let's take a few of them. Let's take this intent pattern and the consequence pattern and the other outcome pattern. Maybe take a couple of them. And we set it together with embedded commands. So whether it's too fast or won't last isn't the issue, but rather how do we assist the client in finding new appropriate patterns to relieve suffering now? The more they do that, the more they find a new habit. But what if we said it a little bit more like this? Whether it's too fast or won't last is the issue, but rather, how do we assist the client in finding new appropriate patterns to relieve suffering now? The more they do that, the more they'll find a new habit. So you're adding the embedded command aspect, the changing your tonality stuff, into the sleight of mouth. Or you could say something like, and you do want to feel relief now, don't you? So this is a way that we can mix these things together, because it really is about changing beliefs. By the way, also you want to remember the tonality throughout this thing. So for instance, if I say, you want to relieve suffering, feel relief now, don't you? That don't you part. If I say don't you with a questioning, don't you? Then it becomes a question. The person wants to find an answer for you. They'll start opening up their little, files in their brain going, I don't know, do I? What is it? Do I or don't you? It becomes a question. And so they look for an answer. But if you say it with a downward tonality, and you do want to feel relief now, don't you? And make it a statement, then they just tend to go like, yeah, I do. I want to feel that. They'll just accept what you're saying. So it's a very, again, subtle awareness of the language that you're using and how specifically you're using it. Now, other thing is, of course, this is really screwed up. I know I deleted that slide. Where's the NLP section? Good God. There's not even an NLP section in here. All right, never mind. I'm not going to put it in there now. That's weird. That's unfortunate. So let me just tell you about the NLP section. Let me take this out of here. Flexibility. Here we go. Let me bring Michelle in. No, seriously. The NLP section was supposed to have a little picture. I'm going to have to be talking to those people over at StreamYard. Gosh, darn it, heck. I spent a lot of time making this happen. Oh, Lord Almighty. It's funny. Anyway, so the NLP thing is about state management, basically. And the idea is if you're in a good state of mind, then you can get access to your resources. Everyone's had this experience. You've had this experience where, you're in a good state. You're in a flow state with things. Your things are happening, and you're like, yeah, that's me, and I'm doing it. You're good. You're fine. You get access to your resources. You're witty. You're on top of things. You can answer back. You're good. And then there are other days where you just got out of bed on the wrong side, and I don't know, just not getting access to stuff, or you're confused, or you're angry, or you're feeling inadequate, or the imposter complex is coming up, and you're just not getting access to your stuff. And then half an hour after the talk is over, you said, oh, I should have said that. Oh, if I'd only said that, then I would have been okay. Right? It's about state management, getting access to your resources. If you're in a good state, you tend to do good things. Bad state, tend to do bad things. kind of simple. And again, very simplistic, tiny sliver of what NLP is all about. But one of the things that we have noticed in the world of NLP is that that state comes from our internal representations. It comes from two things, really. It comes from our internal representations, the things we say to ourselves and represent in our brains. The outside world is represented. We picture things in our mind. We say things to ourselves. And the way that we do that and the questions that we ask ourselves cause us to feel a certain way, right? NLP is thought of as the study of the structure of subjective experience. The study of the structure of subjective experience. So if, for instance, a mouse just crawled past here, and if I had a phobia of mice, I would get off camera real quick. I'd be freaking out. I'd be like, I got to get out of here, right? I'd be freaking out. And it's a tiny little mouse. Another person might see a little tiny mouse and goes like, Herbert, how'd you get out? What are you doing in here? You should be asleep right now. You know, it's just talking to his little pet mouse. Loves me. Why? How is it different? The objective experience, it's a little mouse crawling across the floor. It's the same object. It's the same floor, same activity. Objectively identical. Subjectively, very different. How is it different? Based on what I'm telling myself, picturing in my mind. The picture of that little mouse in my brain is probably this big mouse, like coming to get me, dripping blood off its fangs and stuff. It's like, kind of thing, laden with germs or whatever, right? That's the picture I have in my mind. So I freak out when I see that thing, of course, wouldn't you? So NLP is about, wow, how do you do that? You know, how do we take that subjective experience? And if it's a bad one, like if I don't want to have a phobia of mice, but it hasn't been serving me too well, jumping off webinars and stuff, then maybe I could learn from my friend how he gets so fascinated by mice. How does he picture that? What's this order and syntax with the way he represents mice to himself in his brain that causes at the end of the day to have fascination? All right. The idea of NLP is that our brains are like computers and it's just perfectly working, but running a program that gives you a certain result. You can change the program, get a different result. That's what neurolinguistic programming kind of is in a nutshell. And you should have seen my slides. They were just beautiful. I'd worked all night on them. but anyway, so again, one of the things you can do really quickly and easily is to change your question. Change your question. I worked for a number of years with Tony Robbins, and he was an NLP trainer back in the day. I learned NLP from him. I got certified in NLP from Tony Robbins back in 1986. Got my master practitioner training from him as well, in addition to Robert Dilts. But one of the things he came up with is this thing he called the power of questions. So if you shift your question, you shift your focus. If you shift your focus, then you shift your state. What you focus on determines your state. So if you change your question, so instead of saying, like, how is this bad for me? You can say, in what way could this be good for me? How is this a resource? Change your question and you change your state. So again, when I'm working with these clients, when I'm working with the football player or the selective eater young lady, we're changing the question. You know, we're changing the question that they're asking themselves, or we're changing the question that they're imagining others are asking of him, of them, you know, so that they change their state. So instead of being afraid, they're fascinated. You know, instead of being a victim, they become a researcher. You know, they have different questions like, what's good about this? What's great about this? What do I like about it? What do I notice about this? You know, so we're changing the questions. We're using all three, Ericksonian hypnosis, or neo-Erickson hypnosis, NLP, and Sleight of Mouth, in order to create this great whole gestalt of these things coming together. Anyway, I'm going to ask my friend Michelle to join us, to come in from the sidelines here. I noticed that she's been doing some responding to the things on the side. Thank you for doing that, Michelle. So let me bring her in. Michelle, pop, everybody. There she is. Michelle, you there?
Yep, there we go. Take
There
the
we go.
mute off. That helps.
Okay. So yes, Michelle, I noticed you have a piano in your background.
I do. This one's virtual, unfortunately. My real keyboard's off to the side here. My daughter just started piano lessons. And speaking of changing frames, I was thinking about this the other day. Like when I first learned, it was the tip of the white keys, you know? And so her teacher is giving her a book where she starts with the black keys, like 2-3 fingers at a time on the, and I was like, that's so brilliant because it gets your hands up there where you use the whole key. And I'm going to tie that back to what we're talking about here. It's, you know, you're kind of doing the same thing, but that tiny little tweak, that tiny little change of getting this basic skill in place is going to change the way that she plays piano versus how I learned, where I'm on the very tips. And anytime there's an accidental, my hands don't know what to do. You know, she's not going to have that problem, that fear of being up there on the keyboard. So I think that's kind of how these are. And when you intertwine them, you know, it's a lot of when you have a strong foundation, there's room to grow and use your skills. And that's what gives us flexibility.
Nice. Cool. Yep. It's not, I know that method book. It's not Lila Flesher, but it's a different method book. I used to use them because it is good. The 2 black keys, 3 black keys patterns. You see it all over the piano. It's just a bunch of white notes. Yeah. Nice metaphor. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, and it's also interesting. You know, thing about piano lessons. You know, you start early it's like there's so much stuff, but over time, you get it. You know, it does take time, but it takes time. It takes time, which is why we do it this way. And Michelle, you've been part of it, so you know what I'm talking about. You know, we do it over time. It's 4-month cohort, and then of course we do it over again. So if you join it for a membership for the year, you can take everything I offer within the Essential Coaching Skills umbrella. I will say this, just in case there's people noticing that I teach also the havening techniques. Havening is not part of the Essential Coaching Skills platform. Havening is a separate entity. I teach that also, but it's not part of this. So if you do want to learn havening or something, that's great. It's good. You should. And it's not part of this. But anything related to, I teach storytelling. I teach things about marketing. I teach things that are just add-on courses. If you're a member, you get access to those.
I think we should spend a minute on storytelling because not everyone might know Doug's quite the storyteller. Like so Neo-Ericksonian hypnosis includes some therapeutic storytelling, therapeutic metaphor, but also Doug's done the moth story slams. So he stood up and done live storytelling, and he's also written a book on storytelling. So it's an incredibly powerful skill, especially when you have it.
Oh, you mean this book?
Oh, that book. That looks familiar.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, and you know, Erickson, the reason that book came to be is because of Ericksonian hypnosis. I and my friend Nick Kemp were teaching storytelling classes that started off as therapeutic storytelling, i.e. Ericksonian hypnotherapy teaching tales or however it was. It evolved in the process of teaching these classes, it evolved to being just storytelling because it's such a broad topic, really. Everybody loves stories. Kindergartners, your daughter, everybody loves stories. People, you know, it's all over the place. So it was a fun book to write, and I'm really proud of it, how it's turned out. But yeah, I teach classes in storytelling within this platform. So those are extra. We don't talk about it here in this webinar, but it is part of what I do and part of what I teach and what you have access to.
Yeah. There's a couple questions in the comments, and it looks like someone said, where's she responding? Not here. So it looks like what I've put in StreamYard probably didn't go on to at least YouTube. It looks like that's where he's listening from, or she. So one of the questions, just very recently, Martha asked, would someone tell me what's the complement to anchoring? So can I'll let you answer that, Doug, how anchoring kind of ties into NLP, Sleight of Mouth, and all of this.
Well, what I said, what she might be referring to is I said that there are 2 basic skills. This was actually said by Wyatt Woodsmall many years ago. It's an arguable claim, but it's an interesting frame of mind, which is to say that there are 2 basic skills of NLP, which is anchoring and reframing. So anchoring is a really basic skill. It comes from the area of behavioral psychology, which is to say, like Pavlov's dogs. You create an anchor or a stimulus response relationship by the repetition of a particular stimulus happening at the same time as a response. So, for instance, Pavlov hooked these dogs up to an apparatus so he could measure their saliva, and rang a bell. And while he was ringing a bell, he showed them dog food, and they were hungry. So they were like, oh, dog food, and they're salivating. And he rang a bell at the same time that they were seeing the food. He did this repeatedly over time. And it wasn't much time, but it was, maybe a week. But pretty soon, all he had to do was ring the bell, and the dogs would salivate as if there was food there, even though there wasn't. So he had created this automatic response. Now, it was an automatic response in their neurology. Dogs didn't think about it, not that we know of. They weren't saying, hey, that Dr. Pavlov seems to ring a bell every day at lunchtime. I wonder if there's a correlation between the bell ringing and when we get fed. I could use some food. There's not a cognitive process going on in the animals. They just heard the bell, salivated, right? So we're the same way. We have the same kind of neurology that we respond to. So NLP says, we can use that ability to anchor in responses we want to have rather than responses we've just been automatically getting. So we can, instead of salivating, we can be excited every time the bell rings. We go like, yes, it's time for fun. Whatever it is we want to anchor ourselves from doing. Great skill for performers or coaches. If you're about to go on stage, it's like, what's my anchor for getting on stage? Tony Robbins' whole elaborate sort of routine he went through to get in max state to be on stage. It obviously works for him. The other thing is reframing. So it's anchoring and reframing. Reframing is the idea of, a thing is a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. Nothing's good or bad depending on how you use it. So you can reframe it, look at it in a different frame, then it can be different. So Erickson often said that the problem is the solution. So it's an interesting way of looking at that as well. So I think that's probably what the questioner was asking, although I didn't see the question.
It could be, yeah. I didn't catch quite the minute that it came in to know for certain. Two other thoughts on that. There's a kid that I've been working with who has, I think, probably ADD or something along those lines. I'm not, someone else has diagnosed that. I just don't remember what diagnosis they gave it. And he does this thing where he goes, I'm fast, and he like pretends to run and strong, and he'll hold his arm up and, be like, I'm so strong. And I've started adding that, and smart, and to add to that anchor. So he's got the two that he already believes in, just continuing that anchor to help him with his schoolwork. Martha does say, yes, that was the answer she's looking for. The other thing, Doug, I think is important is like with our NLP skills is learning how to break an anchor. That's something we spend some time in. And that was something I actually struggled with in one of the first classes. Someone gave me a really hard one that was anger around a divorce or something that was very big for that person. And so learning how to like get someone out of that state and break those anchors is really an important element too.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for that. Because not only do we use anchors purposely, set anchors purposely, like I was describing, but we also recognize that we're already anchored. We've been anchored our whole lives. Like, for instance, does this sound familiar to you? When my mother says my entire name in a particular tonality, it it means something. There are things that we have, certain songs that we hear or whatever, smells that we smell. They're like, oh, and you get an automatic response to that. And there's a lot of things that are good, and there's a lot of things that are not good about these things that we're automatically anchored to. So if you recognize that there's an automatic anchor that you've had foisted on you or that you've inadvertently developed over the years, there are methods we use in NLP to eradicate them, to collapse those anchors and then get rid of them, basically, so that we unhook the wiring so the doorbell doesn't work anymore, and then we can hook it up to something else. And when they fire that off next time, it makes us feel good instead of feel bad. So certain processes for that.
There were also a couple of really direct questions about the examples. So one also came from E, who asked, I wonder how you made it so that this was the girl with the eating, didn't want to try new foods. So she would keep eating the food on an ongoing basis versus only eating it once or twice to test it as a scientist would, just being curious out loud.
Yeah, great question. That was an issue, actually. Thank you. That's very clever. Maybe you know somebody with this issue. The hurdle of trying it at all was great. It was a big breakthrough for her to be doing that at all. And I suggested to her once that if they're over 50 on a scale 0 to 100, that she should try them again. And I told her stories about how when I was a kid, I absolutely, and this is true, hated tomatoes. Absolutely. Like, why would anyone eat these things? They're just horrible. And my sister seemed to like them, which was weird. It was just weird. But over time, it changed. And that things do change over time, and she's not a kid anymore. And that's something you can do with kids. By the way, that's the thing you can do with kids. Are you still just a little kid? Because they don't want to be little kids anymore. They want to, and they are growing up. They are changing. It does change. Things do change. So we had her to make a little pact that she would, as a scientist, try it again. Because things do change. I want to see how they change and measure the change and see what's different the second time. Plus, of course, big difference between a tomato in January and a tomato in July. If anyone's ever had a homegrown tomato, you know what I'm talking about. Right, so they're a big different thing there. Oh, I see a question. What was the technique you used with PTS difference? Oh, the veterans, we used what's known in the NLP world as the fast phobia cure. It's also known as the movie theater technique. Sometimes it's a double dissociation phobia cure. We used that. It was renamed the RTM, what's it called? I don't remember, but it was renamed RTM for a more accurate description of what we were doing. The rewind technique, I think, maybe. Anyway, it was the, for lack of a better term, it was the double dissociation phobia cure. Yeah. So Michelle.
And that, yeah.
That was a question of response.
There's a bit of lag, sorry.
Yeah. Well, you're far away. You're like in Canada or something.
I am.
Yeah.
Let me just rub it in with my Tim Hortons cup here.
Tim Hortons cup. That's great. Wait, let me go get my Dunkin' Donuts cup. I'll be right back. I have to run over to Dunkin' Donuts. Anyway, so this membership that we're doing features 4-month cohorts. I teach Sleight of Mouth on Tuesdays from 1 to 2 o'clock, same time frame we're talking right now, 1 to 2:30. It's a 90-minute class. On Wednesdays we do NLP, and on Thursdays we do Erickson Hypnosis. On Thursday afternoons, partially for people who are in other time zones, we also have a 1 hour office hour. 1 hour office hours where I'm just available to you for questions and about anything, any of the 3 subjects. We do those for 4 months, and then we regroup and do this again and invite more people and then do it again. And if you're a year-long member, you can take them as often as you want. And there's a question for you. What part of Canada are you in? She's in
I am in Alberta.
Alberta.
I'm like 45 minutes outside Lloydminster on the Alberta-Saskatchewan border, so about an hour and a half.
Just stop talking.
Right. Somewhere in that great white north up there,
Just like Canada. That's all you need to know. She's up there. Alberta, is it?
Yeah. Near Edmonton.
All right. Is Calgary in Alberta?
Yes. That's about 5 hours from me, 4 to 5.
All right. My wife's been to Calgary a bunch of times. Anyway, so this is a 4-month class, then we do it again, and all the classes that I teach within a year you are eligible for. But also, you should know that I've been doing this now for a few years. There is a library full of videos and audios and PDFs and JPEGs and books and stuff. It's all there. If everything I've ever done about Sleight of Mouth, the book, the workbooks, the tapes, that Martin Bracken is here. Martin Bracken has a starring role in the taste. I don't know, Mark, not if you remember that little moment. He was lurking around the studio the day that I was recording. He said, Mark, come here, say this. It was great. He was great in it as well. But they're in your library. If you did nothing else but join to be in the library, you could be very happy camper. You could learn everything that I've learned here. It's all on tape. It's all on videos. You could spend hours a day and never get to the end of it after the course of a year. But it's also nicely cataloged, so you can find things. You can search for stuff. It's a mine. It's a gold mine. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing that's available to you for the same cost of membership. Plus, of course, when you do a membership, you don't have to travel. If I was teaching a Sleight of Mouth course or whatever, it's a 2-day course in New York City. You'd have to travel to New York City or whatever. It's expensive. This, you get it for 4 months, and you don't have to leave your house. You don't have to leave your living room, virtual or otherwise. You can stay in your virtual living room. It's a great deal. Plus, I think we have one other offer, don't we, Michelle? If we do it, if they sign up in the next week, they get a free hour of my time. Isn't that right?
Yeah, you can a free 1-hour call and consult with Doug, and that can be something you use, excuse me, to work on a personal issue, or you could use it like if there's a client that you're stuck with and you want to have somebody else help, like what coaching would you give this person, what skill would you use, or even to figure out like, okay, there's a lot in the library. What Doug, where do you recommend I start? Like with the amount of time that I have available, how can I get the best use out of this? Because like Doug said, there's a lot in there. And so because he's run in cohorts, and we used to do this just as an individual class instead of just all three together. And so people would take one and then the next one and the next one. So there's lots of examples of Doug working the techniques with different people with different issues. So there's a good library, like if you're working on a specific skill, like timeline, there were some questions about timeline therapy, where you can go in and see different examples of Doug doing something with someone using that skill, or then tying in the timeline with adding some sleight of mouth as their future pacing or something like that, or the NLP, the Ericksonian conversational. So they do have some crossover because the people who have been in the classes before have taken all of those. So really big library. And then also for people who sign up before Friday, I think we were including the language of change program too. So that's another one that ties together the sleight of mouth and the Neo-Ericksonian conversational hypnosis. That was a live class that Doug had taught in New York a number of years ago. And so you get that kind of as like a condensed version. And I think it has a workbook with it as well to help people through that.
It does. In fact, language of change comes with 2 workbooks. One of them you already have, however, if you have the Sleight of Mouth thing, but the other is the language of change workbook that is quite extensive. Now, I should say about that one real quick is that I filmed that seminar in order to have a DVD product. So it's a very, very good product, and it's not sold separately. You can get it only by being here. I wanted to just return to here real quick and go to the final slide that I think is there. It goes. So people were asking, how do you sign up? Here's the link, but Michelle, thank you.
Right, I will. I posted the wrong link in the chat. I posted our StreamYard because I said to people, come over here. So I have to go back and get the right one.
So they're going to join us backstage here. Okay. So on this, if you can scan that QR code, that'll work. It'll get you there, or you can type that essentialcoachingskills.com, or you can just go to essentialcoachingskills.com. There's a link right on the front page of that website as well.
And I'll get it in the chat here and put it on Facebook and YouTube for people viewing there as well. It'll just take me a minute since I got the wrong one.
That'd be really funny if a bunch of people started turning up in the backstage of the StreamYard. By the way, we're on StreamYard. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like Zoom, except it's different. So it's for streaming, like live things, which is why we're using it for the.
There's the right link.
Thank you, Michelle. So classes start April 1st, I believe, or somewhere around that, April 2nd, whatever the first Tuesday is of April. And I hope that you can join us. It'd be awesome to have you.
So, and I would just remind people too, because I know last launch we had some questions about this. So as a membership, it's a recurring payment, and people were like, is it really easy to cancel? Because they've had other people that are not fair business people. And so the FTC, first of all, just for anyone who's buying anything online, the FTC has now passed a rule that you have to make it as easy for someone to leave as sign up. So FTC is in the US. And so that means, because Doug hosts on Kajabi, so Kajabi has hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands probably of users, they're going to follow that. They don't want to get fined. So yes, you have very easy control over how that sort of payment thing works and if you need to update something. And so a lot of people will come, take a look, do the live classes for the 4-month period, and then you can choose if you stay or go. And it's easy. Someone just asked about the StreamYard link. Is StreamYard for the people already in the programs? No, the StreamYard was just for today. So it's so people could hop on and see if they didn't want to be on YouTube. That's E again. So you're not missing anything if you didn't have the StreamYard. You're seeing the same exact stuff if you're watching this on Facebook or on YouTube. And then I'll get you the link for the course here too.
And although it's not important to say it right now for the people who are watching, but this is being recorded, and we will have the recording for people who've missed it to be able to watch this in the future, like tomorrow or later today.
And just to reiterate, the fast action, the language of change, and the hour with Doug, you're not going to see that on the sales page. It's just a fast action bonus. So Doug will, during the first week of the class there, Doug will let you know how you can sign up with him and get access to that. The language of change you'll get automatically, but just that private call with Doug, you're not going to see that on the page. You won't see info on it. As you log in, he'll let you know the first class there how to access that.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm excited. See you guys in class.
Yes, I'm excited.
Go ahead.
No.
And tomorrow you're talking some more about NLP as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Tomorrow I'm doing a Facebook Live or YouTube Live, whatever, wherever you are, it's live there. On more in depth on NLP, and then Friday, same thing again, 1 to 2 o'clock Eastern time on Neo Erickson and hypnosis. So join us there.
Yeah. All right.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye. End stream.